In Venezuela, the president of the National Assembly provided evidence linking former Congressperson Juan Guaido with Colombian drug trafficking mafias. Russia's President Vladimir Putin reiterated that the main goal of the Russian operation in Ukraine is to free people from suffering and genocide. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees reported that South Sudan continues to have the largest refugee crisis on the African continent. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, from the teleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. And now we begin. The president of the National Assembly of Venezuela, Jorge Rodriguez, denounced with evidence the links of former Congressperson Juan Guaido with Colombian drug trafficking mafias. The head of parliament made reference to the recent arrest in Cartagena of the Italian-Venezuelan citizen Biagio Garofalo, who is wanted in more than 190 countries by a complaint for Spain for drug trafficking, besides being investigated for a criminal police record committed in Colombia. The head of the parliament showed evidence linking Garofalo with other spokespersons of the extreme right. The parliamentarian questioned those implicated who distanced themselves from the fact, but the evidence proves their link with Garofalo, who was the head of the Voluntad Popular Party in the locality of Anaco, in the eastern state of Anzoátegui.
There is a direct relationship between Juan Guaido and Colombian drug trafficking. This is the Rastrojos group. Nobody can say that alias El Brother and alias El Menor are not murderers, drug traffickers, butchers. Even one of them had in one of the farms that was raided a place to dismember corpses. Well, here is Juan Guaido hugging one of these jewels.
In addition, Rodriguez presented a document signed by Juan Guaido where Biagio Garofalo is appointed as the head of the popular will in the Anaco municipality of Anzoátegui state.
At the ordinary meeting of national activists on January 16, 2016, after receiving the report on the restructuring of the municipality of Anaco in the state of Anzoátegui, this body has, see this, this is from the verb to have, it is misspelled here, it is with an H. This body has decided to appoint activist Biagio Benito Garofalo Orte as coordinator of the municipality. Holder of identity card number 11305306. And why I do attribute this guy this spelling mistake? Because look who signed it. Who signs the appointment of Biagio Benito Garofalo Forte as municipality responsible of Anaco? Juan Gerardo Guaido Márquez, at the time Secretary of National Organization of the terrorist group Voluntad Popular.
In this regard, the Colombian National Civil Registry Office stated that some irregularities will be corrected in the legislative and primary electoral process that took place on 13th March. The registry office, in its Twitter account, wrote that the National Register, Alexander Vega Rocha, explained that some errors were detected in the E14 forms, and this will be corrected in the scrutiny commissions. In another tweet, the entity quoted the words of National Register Vega Rocha, writing, "If there was fraud in the part of some jurors, these actions will be brought to the attention of the prosecutor's office." He also reiterated that Colombians must have full confidence in their institutions. In the midst of this situation, electoral experts assert that with a possible recount of the votes, the historic pact would manage to elect 20 senators and not 16 as the pre-count indicated. If confirmed, the political conglomerate will not only become the leading force, but will also become the largest bench in the legislature, the same as the current governing party, the Democratic Center. In this context, the Electoral Observation Mission warned about these facts and suggested that the electoral body guarantee a recount of the votes in order to correct these irregularities. In Peru, judicial authorities ordered the confiscation of the ship Mare Doricum, involved in the oil spill that affected La Ventanilla beach. The Peruvian judiciary sentenced the confiscation of the ship involved in the spill occurring in January. This order is coherent to the ruling, despite the fact that the company that owns the vessel put up a letter to guarantee of $74 million, alleging the need to carry out spending surveys. The ship is docked in the Sea of La Ventanilla with ban to set sail, while the investigations are being carried out. The ruling sums up to the investigation process of the ship's captain, Giacomo Pisani, accused of environmental crime. And the Mexican parliament lifted the ban on President Andrés Manuel López Obrador to refer to the issue of the recall of mandate. This Friday, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador celebrated the Senate's decision, inviting citizens to vote on April 10th in the recall referendum. He said that this is a national right and that everyone must exercise the right to vote. He also stated that citizens have the power to revoke the mandate of a ruler if he or she acts badly and should not wait until the end of his or her term to leave office. In this context, López Obrador expressed that he is willing to leave office if the people decide to do so on April 10th. In Brazil, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva will visit the city of Curitiba with the aim of strengthening political support for the 2022 presidential elections. The former Brazilian president is expected to arrive in the capital of the southern state of Paraná this Friday to take part in an event to join the Workers' Party of the former governor and senator of that state, Roberto Riquelme. During the event, activists from the southern part of the country are expected to gather to seek support for the presidential elections. Opinion polls in Brazil show that Lula da Silva heads the voting intentions ahead of the October elections. And we remain in Brazil, where the Supreme Federal Court decided to suspend telegram service in the whole country. Brazilian Federal Supreme Court Judge Alexandre de Moraes ruled that digital platforms and internet providers block the use of chatting app Telegram throughout the country. The judge said the application is notorious for its stance of not cooperating with judicial and police authorities in several countries, by not moderating content on these channels and protecting the content of these users' chats to the extreme. The social app is installed on 53% of Brazilian cell phones and is widely used by the President Jair Bolsonaro and his allies. And thousands of social activists in Brazil took to the streets to demand an extension of Supreme Court order that will postpone evictions until the COVID-19 pandemic is over. Brian Meir, our correspondent in Sao Paulo, with the details.
On March 17th, tens of thousands of social movement activists in 17 Brazilian cities took to the streets to demand an extension to a Supreme Court order barring evictions during the COVID-19 pandemic. The protest was part of the ongoing Zero Evictions campaign, and in São Paulo, protesters blocked off Paulista Avenue, the most important thoroughfare in the downtown business district.
This court order expires on March 31st, and over 500,000 people will run the immediate risk of being thrown out on the streets unless it is extended. And beyond the pandemic, there are social issues at stake: unemployment, hunger, and rising rent prices. It's a social drama that is affecting 500,000 people in Brazil.
In addition to demanding an extension on the court order banning evictions, the social movements are drawing attention to a series of ongoing social problems in Brazil that have been exacerbated by the pandemic.
This act guarantees that people living in occupations can be evicted until the end of the pandemic. But the COVID-19 pandemic hasn't ended, and the post-COVID effects will be even worse. Many families are homeless and unemployed, and we are asking the Supreme Court to extend its order.
The ultimate goal of the Zero Evictions campaign is to ban all evictions on occupied land until Brazil's housing deficit of 5.8 million units is resolved. Brian Meir, teleSUR, São Paulo.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Russia's President Vladimir Putin reiterated that the main goal of the Russian operation in Ukraine is to free people from suffering and genocide. The statement was made during the celebrations in Moscow of the 8th anniversary of the Crimea's annexation to Russia, while large crowds in the streets waved flags with the Z symbol and expressed support for the military operations in Ukraine. The Russian president recalled that Donbass did not accept the coup in Ukraine, which is why Kiev retaliated against it with military operations. The Russian head of state also said that the population of Crimea made the right decision that allowed it to put an end to the humiliating situation to which it was subjected by the Ukrainian authorities. And the negotiations between Russia and Ukraine due to the tensions caused by the Moscow's special military operation continue. The head of the Russian delegation, Vladimir Medinsky, stated that Ukraine's neutral status and its non-membership to NATO represent one of the most debated points during the negotiations. During the second round, the parties made progress towards an understanding of joint guarantees for the evacuation of civilians through humanitarian corridors. The two countries have held so far 3 rounds of physical meetings in Belarus and still continue to communicate remotely. The United Nations Security Council held a meeting on Friday at the request of Russia to discuss the U.S. military biolabs program in Ukraine. Russia requested the emergency meeting to deal with U.S. helping implement dangerous projects in Ukraine as part of their military biological programs. The permanent representative of Russia to the UN, Vasilin Mbezia, presented new documents obtained in the course of the military operation that proved the development of these joint biological programs. Russia also tried to promote another meeting on Ukraine to pass a balanced, depoliticized, and action-oriented resolution. And during the United Nations Security Council about the threats to international peace and security, the permanent representative of Russia to the international body, Vasilin Mbezia, presented evidence of the implementation of dangerous projects in Ukraine as part of their military biological programs.
President, colleagues, we've already said that during Russia's special military operation in Ukraine, information was discovered regarding the implementation of the Ukrainian authorities with the support and the direct supervision of the US Ministry of Defense of dangerous projects as part of their military and biological program. This activity was carried out on the territory of Ukraine, at the center of Eastern Europe, and in the western borders of Russia, which created a real threat for the biosecurity of our country and the whole region.
The Russian diplomat also recalled an agreement signed in 2005 between the U.S. Department of Defense and the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, which clearly set the support from the Pentagon to join biological research and use dangerous pathogens located in facilities on Ukrainian territory.
I recall here we're talking about an agreement signed in 2005 between the U.S. Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, which clearly sets forth support for the Pentagon to joint biological research applicable to dangerous pathogens located in facilities on Ukrainian territory.
During his speech before the Security Council, Vasilin Mbezia referred to new details that came to light about the United States helping the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and not the Ministry of Health, as they claimed.
Over the last week, new details have come to light, which allow us to state that the components for biological weapons were being created on the territory of Ukraine. The implementation of the aforementioned American-Ukrainian agreement from 2005, and comments on which we're still waiting for from the US representation, has been going full steam ahead for all these years. However, from the document we can see that the American colleagues were not helping, as they claim, the Ukrainian Ministry of Health, but rather the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense.
Chinese President Xi Jinping held a video conference this Friday with his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden to discuss the state of bilateral relations and the issues of common interest, such as the Donbass conflict. According to the Chinese official President Xi Jinping maintains his position of not accepting pressure or coercion from the White House on the issue of Ukraine, as well as not allowing Washington to damage the country's development plans. The dialogue between the two heads of state comes shortly after Washington declared that Chinese companies and citizens could face reprisals if they don't comply with the unilateral sanctions imposed on Russia by the Western powers. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees reported that South Sudan continues to have the largest refugee crisis on the African continent. According to the international organization, 65% of the refugees in the country are children. The entity detailed that South Sudan continues to struggle with violence, chronic food insecurity, and the impact of major flooding and climate events that are forcing millions of people to flee their homes in search for assistance. That is why the UN Refugee Agency is requesting $1.2 billion to provide humanitarian assistance and protection to 2.3 million people. With the needed funds, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan, and Uganda will be supported in their efforts to provide protection and enable South Sudanese refugees to access basic services and boost their resilience. In Tel Aviv, an NGO denounced the invasion of Jewish settlers of the Palestinian villages of Huzan and Batir, protected by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. The non-governmental organization Peace Now denounced in a release the setting up of a Jewish settler guard post in an area of the West Bank, declared World Heritage Site in 2014 by UNESCO. The area is remarkable for its traditional crops, ancient terraces, and irrigation canals. With this action, the settlers aim to create an Israeli corridor between the city of Bethlehem and the Palestinian villages of Huzan and Batir in order to counteract the territorial continuity and the annexation of a future state for the Palestinian people. In Malaysia, a fire broke out in a coastal village on Thursday, leaving hundreds of houses destroyed. More than 700 wooden houses were razed to the ground in a floating community of stilt houses in Kurnia Haya village in the Sabah state. Volunteer firefighters spent 5 hours before the fire was brought under control at around 9 p.m. Dozens of people who had been trapped by the flames had to be rescued with boats. Authorities report no injuries in the incident, while total damage to property has yet to be estimated. And now we move on to other topics. Iranian health authorities started procedures to export the first lot of COVID-19 vaccine, Coviran Baccarat, to Nicaragua. The drugs will arrive as donation to Nicaragua. The Coviran Baccarat vaccine is the first Iranian injectable candidate against COVID-19, which is currently in the registration process before the World Health Organization, the WHO. This time, the shipment will transport 2,000 doses of the immunizer that will be sent in May, to strengthen the vaccination plan against the coronavirus in that Central American country. The Nicaraguan ambassador in Tehran assured that the antigen has an effectiveness of 99%. So we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.